Eva Dawson, 20 years old, stood barefoot in 6 inches of snow on Christmas Eve, her whole body shaking as the cold bit through her socks. She had only asked her father why she didn't get even one small gift, but Mark pushed her outside and locked the door. Inside the warm house, 30 guests laughed and raised champagne glasses like nothing had happened. Eva watched the lights from the tall Christmas tree flash red and gold through the frosted window. Kelly stood near the glass, smiled at her and slowly pulled the curtain shut without a word. Eva thought that moment would be the lowest point of her life, but she was wrong. As her toes slowly went numb, a long black car rolled to a stop at the curb. A woman stepped out wrapped in a white coat, her posture strong and calm. It was the woman Mark spent 10 years claiming never cared whether Eva lived or died. But the truth was different. This woman had not come empty-handed, and after tonight Mark would never again tell people that everything in this house belonged to him. Before that moment, Eva did not understand how her story truly began. 12 years earlier, the sky had been a dull gray the day they buried Eva's mother, Maria. 9-year-old Eva stood beside her grandmother Grace, who smelled like jasmine and old books. Grace squeezed her hand and whispered, "Your mama had good taste, sweetheart." At the cemetery, Grace knelt in front of Eva and gently held her face. "I will always find you, little star," she whispered with swollen eyes. But Mark stepped between them instantly. "You need to go, Grace," he barked. Grace stood tall. "She's my granddaughter." Mark's jaw locked. "Not anymore." Grace looked at Eva over Mark's shoulder, her lips moving but no sound coming out. She walked away slowly, wiping her eyes as she reached her car. Within a month, Mark moved Eva to a new town, disconnected every number and threw away the address book from Maria's desk. "It's just us now," he said at dinner. And Eva believed him because she was a child with no reason to doubt. 2 years later, Mark brought home a woman named Linda and her daughter, Kelly. "This will be wonderful," Linda said as she gripped Eva's shoulders too tightly. Within a week, Kelly moved into Eva's upstairs room, the one with the window seat Maria built by hand. Eva was moved to the cold basement, where a cot and a flickering lamp became her new bedroom. Linda explained, "Kelly needs sunlight for her skin." Kelly did not have a skin condition, she just liked sunbathing. Eva learned the new rules fast. She cooked breakfast, washed dishes, folded laundry and stayed quiet. When she once asked if Kelly could wash the dishes, Linda's eyes filled with fake tears. "I try so hard, Mark, and she still resents me," she said. Mark glared at Eva. "Apologize now." Eva apologized the way she always did because challenging Linda only brought more trouble. What she didn't know was that every birthday and every Christmas, a package arrived at their old house. Gifts and letters from Grace. But Mark always signed the return slip before Eva ever saw a single envelope. By the time she turned 18, Eva had worked 2 small jobs to survive college, while Kelly dropped out and received a used car as a reward. "She's finding herself," Linda said proudly. Meanwhile, Eva counted crumpled bills to buy her own textbooks without asking anyone for help. One night during Thanksgiving break, Eva went to the basement to find an extra blanket. Behind the water heater she discovered a dusty cardboard box marked Maria, personal. Her mother's handwriting froze her in place. Inside she found a silk scarf, a soft perfume bottle, and an old photograph of Maria laughing with an older woman in a navy dress. On the back in blue ink were 5 words, "Maria and Mom, Grace's 60th birthday." Eva's breath caught. Mark had told her Grace died before she was born. But the picture held a digital date from only 2 years before Eva's birth. Eva almost searched Grace's name online right there, but she knew Mark checked her browsing history every Sunday. So she closed the box and waited. Months later, when she came home for Easter, the box was gone. She found Linda arranging flowers and asked softly, "Where's the box behind the water heater?" Linda didn't look up. "Old junk. I donated it." Eva's voice shook. "It belonged to my mom." Linda sighed dramatically. "Sweetie, it was collecting dust." That night Eva couldn't sleep. She opened her phone and checked the local listings. Her stomach dropped when she saw her mother's necklace for sale. The seller's name was unmistakable, Linda's email handle the same one she used for church groups. Eva took screenshots, then approached Mark in the garage the next morning. "She's selling Mom's things," Eva said quietly, holding out her phone. Mark barely looked. "Linda is my wife. This is her house too." Drop it. Eva swallowed hard. Those were Mom's. Mark's voice sharpened instantly. Drop it, Eva. When the garage door closed behind him, Eva stood alone, staring at the stain on the concrete floor. For the first time she wondered if silence was not loyalty, but surrender. December arrived, bringing cold mornings and heavy skies. Mark called a family meeting at the dining table. Linda sat beside him with a pen and notepad like she was running a business briefing. We're hosting Christmas Eve, Mark announced. 30 guests. Eva, you handle the food. Ham, sides, desserts, decorations, the whole spread. Eva glanced at Kelly, who was painting her nails at the same table. What's Kelly doing? She asked quietly. Kelly is helping with the guest list, Linda replied with a bright smile. Eva nodded, stood up, and began preparing for 3 days of work that no one would thank her for. For 3 long days, Eva cooked from dawn until late at night. She glazed the ham, rolled pie crusts, chopped vegetables, and ironed a tablecloth that still carried a faint scent of her mother's lavender. On December 23rd, she stood before the huge 9-foot tree Linda insisted on. Beneath it were neatly wrapped gifts, 32 in total. Eva checked every tag and found none with her name. When she asked Linda if she was invited as a guest or simply as staff, Linda laughed softly. Don't be dramatic, sweetheart. Family helps family. Eva returned to the kitchen in silence. That afternoon their neighbor Mrs. Reed knocked on the side door holding a plate of gingerbread cookies. Her eyes immediately landed on Eva, flour on her cheek, apron stained, hands trembling from exhaustion. All this is you? She asked gently. Eva nodded. Family helps family. But her voice cracked. Mrs. Reed touched her elbow and guided her outside for a private moment. Honey, she whispered, a black car parked here yesterday. Sat for nearly an hour. And, you look just like your mother. Eva's heart thudded. She opened her mouth, but Mark appeared behind them, smiling too sharply. Thanks for the cookies, Mrs. Reed, Mark said warmly, but his eyes warned her to stop talking. Mrs. Reed straightened her coat. Merry Christmas, sweetheart, she said to Eva before leaving quickly, her face tight with worry. Christmas Eve arrived bright and cold. Guests poured into the house, filling the living room with perfume, chatter, and the glow of the tall tree. Eva stayed in the kitchen, plating appetizers while hearing Mark introduce Kelly to everyone. She's been such a blessing, he said proudly. When someone asked where Eva was, Linda replied, oh, she insisted on helping. She loves staying busy. Eva stepped into the dining room wearing her one clean navy sweater and sat quietly at the far end of the table. No one questioned why she had no place card. She watched as gift after gift was opened, Kelly smiling, Linda beaming, Mark laughing with guests like everything in this house existed because of him. When the pile grew small, Eva finally asked, Dad, is there one for me? The room quieted slowly like candles snuffing out one by one. Linda's eyes filled with instant tears. Eva, this isn't the time, she whispered. Eva's voice stayed calm. I'm just asking. Mark stood abruptly and grabbed Eva's upper arm. We talked about this, he hissed, dragging her toward the door. You want to talk back? Do it outside. Eva stumbled onto the porch as the freezing air swallowed her whole. He shut the door and locked it. She stood barefoot in the snow, watching warmth glow through the windows while music resumed inside. Her feet burned, then numbed. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. When Kelly spotted her from inside, she smirked, waved slowly, and pulled the curtain shut. Eva curled her arms around herself, whispering, Mom, I don't know what to do. As the wind pushed against her thin sweater, Eva's body trembled harder. Inside the house, Mark spoke loudly, shaping a story she could barely hear through the wall. Eva has been struggling, he told the guests. We've tried everything. Linda dabbed her eyes dramatically. I just want her to be happy. Kelly added from the couch. She screamed at Mom last week. Eva tasted the hurt in her throat. She knew it was all lies, the same narrative they had repeated for years. Yet not a single person stood to question it. She hugged her knees tighter, convinced she might faint. Through the side window, Eva spotted movement. Mrs. Reed standing near the curtain, watching her with worry. Eva saw her mouth move as she spoke to Mark, but he waved her off sharply, dismissing her concern like it was an annoyance. Mrs. Reed stared at him a long moment, then turned away. Eva's breath shook in her chest. She thought about the photograph of Maria and Grace, about the name she had been forbidden to search, about the possibility that her grandmother might still be alive. She whispered into the wind, "Mom, what do I do?" The snow didn't answer, but something else soon would. The guests inside continued laughing as if nothing had happened. Mark raised his glass and apologized for the disruption. Linda played the role of the wounded wife, and Kelly repeated her lies with an innocent face. Eva watched everything through the frosted window, her tears freezing on her cheeks. But she also noticed Mrs. Reed slipping her coat on and walking toward the back door instead of the front. Moments later, the side gate creaked and footsteps crunched in the snow behind Eva. Mrs. Reed approached with a wool blanket and draped it gently around Eva's shoulders. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "I called someone." Eva's teeth chattered. "Who?" Mrs. Reed knelt beside her, eyes steady and kind. "Someone who should have been here long ago." A deep engine hum echoed down the street. The front door swung open just as the headlights turned onto their road. Mark stepped into the doorway, his voice sharp. "Mrs. Reed, this is a family matter." She didn't move. "A child standing barefoot in the snow is everyone's matter, Mark." He scoffed. "She's learning a lesson." Mrs. Reed's chin lifted. "Maria would be ashamed of you." His face whitened, then flushed red. But before he could speak again, the car arrived. A long black limousine glided to the curb, its headlights washing over the snow. The engine quieted and a driver stepped out, walking to the back door. He opened it carefully. First came a man in a gray coat carrying a briefcase, Mr. Dean. Then a thin hand with a gold ring appeared on the doorframe. A woman stepped out, wrapped in a white coat, silver hair pinned neatly back. She saw Eva and stopped, her breath catching. In 5 determined steps, she crossed the yard, removed her coat and placed it around Eva. Her voice trembled with emotion. "Little star." Eva knew that voice, not from memory but from the photograph in the hidden box. The woman's face carried the same warmth, the same strength, the same quiet power. "You," Eva whispered through trembling lips. "Your Grace." Grace cupped Eva's cold cheeks in her warm hands. "I know you too, sweetheart. I've been looking for you for a very long time." Eva fell into her grandmother's arms as the snow swirled around them. Grace held her tightly, her breath shaking with 12 years of love she had been denied. Then she looked toward the glowing house with a gaze that hardened like steel. "Mr. Dean," Grace said firmly. The man with the briefcase stepped forward. Grace walked straight to the front door, lifting her hand to knock with a purpose that could silence a room. She struck the wood 3 times, steady and final. Mark opened the door, champagne still in hand, a smile half formed. When he saw Grace, the glass tilted, spilling onto his wrist. "Grace," he choked. "What are you doing here?" She didn't return his greeting. Instead, she looked past him into the living room where 30 guests now stared at the doorway. Then she turned back to him, cold and clear. "You locked my granddaughter in the snow," Grace said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the music, the chatter and the lies. "On Christmas Eve. In the house I bought." Gasps filled the room. Linda stood from the couch. "Who is this woman?" she demanded, her face tightening. Grace ignored her and stepped inside, pointing toward the documents Mr. Dean placed on the dining table. 47 Maple Drive was purchased by me in 2003 as a wedding gift for my daughter Maria. The deed is in my name. It has always been in my name." Mark's face drained of color. Mark stammered, "I've been paying, this is my home." Grace shook her head slowly. "You've been living here rent-free for 20 years. I allowed it for Maria's sake, then for Eva's. But you used this house as a cage." Mr. Dean placed a stack of envelopes on the table, 12 years of letters. "All returned to sender," he explained. Grace picked up the bundle and held it toward the guests. "I wrote to my granddaughter every birthday and every Christmas. Not one letter reached her." The room fell into heavy silence. Eva stepped inside, wrapped in Grace's coat, her feet leaving melted prints. Eva looked at Mark, her voice barely above a whisper. "You sent them back?" Mark's voice cracked. "She's manipulating you, Eva. Just like she manipulated your mother." A voice rose from the back of the room. It was Mrs. Reed. "That's a lie, Mark. I was there. Maria loved her mother. You were the one who cut Grace off." Mark's shoulders sagged under the truth. Linda backed away slowly, her purse already on her arm, realizing the foundation of her life was collapsing. Kelly stared at her father, confused and shaking. And in the center of the room, Mark had nothing left to say. Grace waited for silence before she spoke again. Effective January 15th, I am reclaiming this property. You have 3 weeks to vacate. Linda inhaled sharply. You told me this was your house, she said to Mark, betrayal cracking through her voice. Mark shook his head weakly, but no words came. Grace turned to Linda. And you, selling Maria's necklace for $40? Shameful. Linda staggered back, color draining from her face. Mr. Dean closed the briefcase with a soft click. The guests exchanged uncomfortable looks, realizing they had witnessed the truth unravel right in front of them. Mark tried one last angle, his voice suddenly soft, almost pleading. Eva, sweetheart. Don't let her come between us. I just lost my temper. Eva looked at him, remembering the cold, the locked door, the quiet cruelty of years. You didn't lose your temper, she said. You made a choice. His face tightened, but she continued. Just like you chose to hide my letters. Just like you chose to tell me my grandmother abandoned me. Grace stepped beside her, steady as a pillar. The guests watched, not one person stepping forward to defend Mark this time. Eva slipped her hand into Grace's, feeling warmth spread through her numb fingers. I'm done waiting outside your door, she said quietly. And she meant every word. Grace squeezed her hand. Come home, sweetheart. Mrs. Reed opened the front door wider, her eyes full of pride and relief. Eva walked out of the house without looking back. The limousine's warmth wrapped around her like a blanket, soft and safe. Grace sat beside her, gently covering her legs with another blanket. Eva felt her chest crack open, not from pain but from release, like chains falling away after years of silence. As the limousine pulled away, Eva watched the house shrink into the distance. The Christmas lights flickered in the windows, but none of that warmth had ever truly been hers. Grace held Eva's freezing hands and whispered, I looked for you every day. I never stopped. Eva's voice broke. He said you didn't want me. Grace shook her head, eyes shining. I wanted you so much I hired 3 investigators. The first 2 found nothing because your father hid everything under different names. The third found this address 3 days ago. And I came immediately. Not for Christmas, for you. Eva cried freely, the sound raw and shaking, 12 years of swallowed pain finally finding air. Grace didn't hush her or rush her. She simply held her, steady and sure, like someone determined never to let go again. When Eva finally quieted, she leaned her head against the window, watching the snow blur past. For the first time she wasn't cold. When they arrived at Grace's home, a warm craftsman house on a peaceful hill, Grace showed her the upstairs room filled with sunlight. You deserve light, Grace said softly. And Eva slept that night without fear for the first time in years. The next weeks unfolded gently. Eva finished nursing school while living with Grace, riding the bus each morning as Grace insisted on driving her to the station. I missed too many years, Grace said. Let me have these moments. When graduation came, Grace sat proudly in the second row beside Mrs. Reed, clapping with both hands as Eva crossed the stage. Later at home, Grace placed a large box on the kitchen table. Inside were 144 letters. Every birthday, every Christmas, every moment of love Eva was meant to receive. Eva read them all, tears dripping onto the envelopes. A year later, Eva stood in Grace's living room beside a small Christmas tree decorated with gentle lights. Snow fell outside, but she watched it from the warm side of the window. Around her neck rested a pearl necklace, a replica of her mother's, made from an old photograph Grace had saved. Eva placed her hand over the locket and smiled softly. Last Christmas she had stood freezing on a porch, believing she had no place in the world. This Christmas she stood in a home full of love. Merry Christmas, little star, Grace whispered. Eva whispered back, Merry Christmas, Grandma.